So our classification of neurons, this pretty much it does mirror the functional classification of different parts of the nervous system. So you have your sensory neurons, and sometimes called afferent. I don't like this word because it's way too close to the word for motor neurons, which is efferent. So I'm fine with just sensory. We can just call them sensory neurons in this class. They respond to stimuli. Stimuli could be things like light, touch, sound, etc. All of those sensory, all of those things that you can sense. And they will take that information to the CNS. So it takes information about light, touch, sound, taste, smell, etc. And it'll transmit it to your spinal cord and to your brain. So those neurons go, I always think of them as going up to your brain. This was your brain here. That is carrying information, sensory information up to your brain. Then you have within your brain, we're not going to go within the brain yet. I'm going to motor. Okay, so motor or efferent. So now you know why I don't like the words afferent and efferent. They're way too close. I just like motor. Motor neurons is a totally acceptable term. This is how you generate a response. And this is going to be information going from the brain down to a muscle or to a gland. So for instance, you might send information out to your body that says run. Why would you do that? Because maybe you just saw information about, you saw a bear. So you saw a bear, you sent that information up to your brain, and your brain's response was run. And it'll send that response to your muscles so you can run via, so it sends it to the muscles. And so bear, you saw vision. In your vision, you saw a bear, sent that information to your brain, and the brain sent information to your muscles to run. But somewhere in between there, you did in fact process that information. So you have another set of neurons called interneurons. Interneurons are as many as 99% of all of your total neurons are probably packed within the CNS. These interneurons, so these are within your brain and spinal cord. They never leave the brain and the spinal cord. So these might be a lot shorter than your motor and your sensory. Because your motor and your sensory, like this yellow one's got to go all the way down to from your spinal cord to maybe like the muscles, gastrocnemius in your leg in order for you to run. But the little interneurons are just within your brain. Draw a spinal cord there full of little tiny interneurons. And these are the ones that are going to, well, the fancy word would be integrative function. Think about the information. So it's going to receive the information, process it. So let's call that thinking. Not always conscious. Maybe store it. This is what you think of as memory. And then you're going to like choose some response. You're going to solve the problem. And then you could send that response to your motor neurons. And you do not need to know the steps of the myelin sheath, like the process of myelination is what they would call it during growth and development. This happens during fetal development and all the way up through, really up until adulthood, you're creating myelin sheath. So you don't actually need to know these steps again, but it is helpful to look at them so you understand what myelin is. So myelin is actually a cell, a different type of cell, and I'll tell you what kinds of cells in just a little bit, but it's not a neuron. So this yellow part here, this is part of the neuron, that's the axon right there. And then you also have here a different type of cell, this bluish gray cell right here. And that cell literally wraps itself around the axon. And you can see it start wrapping here in the second one. And then you can see it just continue wrapping several, multiple layers. And this is actually plasma membrane of that cell. So this cell makes an incredibly huge plasma membrane, enough that it can just wrap its plasma membrane around the axon. So it's pretty remarkable. Now, plasma membrane, what are cell membranes made of? Hopefully you're thinking phospholipids. In particular, lipids, fat. So you may have heard that your brain is really fatty. It is. It's fatty because there is so much fat in the myelin. It's actually the myelin that's really, really fatty. And that is what gives some parts of your nervous system a white appearance. is because of all of those lipids, those fatty layers upon layers upon layers upon layers that surround a lot of your axons. Not all of your axons are myelinated, but especially the long ones. They have myelin because they need to go a long distance. The different cell types. There's actually 2 different cell types that make myelin. You have these cells in the CNS. So the CNS here being the brain and the spinal cord. You have these cells in the brain and the spinal cord called oligodendrocytes, which means, oops, sites, that's an S, no R there. Oligodendrocytes, which oligo means many branches. That's what that means, many branches, cells. So a single oligodendrocyte here, here's one, it will send out pieces of plasma membrane that wrap around several different spots along the axon in between these neurofibril nodes. They're bare areas of the axon. So this one in particular sends out 5, and this one here has 5 actually as well. So they send out like 4 or 5 different wrappings to different axons, and it could be, more than one neuron here. You can see there's 3 different axons, so there's actually 3 different neurons here. And that's only in the brain and the spinal cord. Contrast that with what happens in the PNS. So this would be in your nerves, because nerves are just bundles of axons. And instead, the cell is called a neurolemocyte. That's the name of the cell in the PNS, so the nerves that run through your body. And the difference is, besides their location, the other difference is every single wrapping is a different cell. So instead of one cell sending out like 4 or 5 wrappings, each cell only has 1 wrapping. So you've got 4, 5, 6, 7 different cells along the length of this axon. And that's actually a very small number. If you thought about, one of those really long neurons that goes from, say, your lumbar area all the way to the tip of your toe, it'd be like 1 million or something neurolemocytes lined up along the length of that axon all the way from your lumbar region down to the tip of your toe. So you only have one neuron, one extremely big, long neuron, but you've got many, many neurolemocytes that are running along the length of that axon. And that's, again, what makes your nerves have that white appearance, is all of this lipid in those neurolemocytes.